Silence isn't peace. It's preparation. Varic Sen's voice cracked through the chamber before his feet had fully crossed the threshold. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sentence cut sharper than any formal declaration, threading through the amphitheater's air like a wire pulled tight. The sound echoed briefly off the obsidian glass archways, then dissolved into the stale, dry stillness that permeated the Cordanus assembly. Delegates flinched, not from volume, but the clarity of his intrusion. You did not speak before being acknowledged. Varic did. He limped forward with mechanical finality, the heel of his left boot dragging slightly on each step, scuffing the volcanic inlay that lined the path toward the dais. His uniform was antiquated, weather-worn synth fiber dyed the color of rusted sky, with deep-set folds that whispered of long-forgotten commands. Half his face bore the patchwork remnants of ion scarring, the right eye filmed over with pale crystal growths. The other eye, steel gray, vivid, cut across the tiered ranks of watching counselors. Above him, laser plasma banners traced arcs of unreadable diplomatic data across the concave ceiling, their radiant threads mapping laws older than half the seated members. Earth flickered briefly among the projections, diminished, dormant, backgrounded by the newer economic corridors rising from sectors like Galatir and Hessen Reach. "State your intent, Varic Sen," Tharn Dravic called from the dais, his tone practiced, cool, amused, just short of contempt. Varic halted. His hands, scarred and ungloved, rested against the edge of his tattered belt sash. From it, he withdrew a single item, a dulled service disc, edges scored with wear. He didn't hold it aloft. He simply let it rest in his palm, open and visible. "This," Varic said, "is the last proof of the war you've chosen to forget. I bring it not to seek favor, but to warn." The chamber remained still. A ventilation cycle shifted the air faintly, crisp, over-treated, stripped of scent. Aides exchanged glances behind recessed control panels, their posture uncertain, eyes flicking to the dais. Morin Vix, lounging with his usual slouch in the lower diplomat tiers, rotated a stylus between two fingers and smirked. "A warning, Sen, the last time Earth so much as twitched, most of our tech ran on bonded helium. They've rusted under their own sky." Varic's gaze didn't shift. "You measure threat by motion. I measure it by quiet." A flicker passed across Dravic's expression. Not fear, not yet, just a note of recalibration. "I've seen fleets silenced without a signal fired," Varic continued. "I've watched languages erased from the galactic tongue because Earth said nothing." He turned slowly, his steps echoing in the curved gallery. "You think diplomacy is concession. You think silence is retreat. But Earth never lost the war. You just stopped attending it." The laser plasma displays above pulsed faintly, recalibrating planetary asset projections. Earth now registered as a non-threat, green-bordered, energy quiet, free for trade resolution. Varic reached the center circle beneath the tribunal's gaze. His voice dropped, not to whisper, but to draw them forward. "They buried code inside treaties. Not viruses, permissions. Systems you now use were built on the back of concessions they offered willingly, and you accepted." Counselor Harth Ven, a tall, gaunt administrator from the fiscal sector, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting Earth left? What traps?" Varic chuckled once, a dry sound like wind passing over stone. "No, they left instructions, and you're finally following them." A ripple passed through the delegates, shifted robes, quiet exchanges, fingertips brushing their data interfaces. Dravic remained motionless. "Enough," he said. "You speak as if Earth holds influence. You speak as if their silence hides capability. But the Assembly's audits have shown. You audit firepower. You never audited memory." Varic's interruption was unblinking. "Earth doesn't forget. It observes. It waits." Behind him, one of the lower-tier aides minimized a feed from orbital surveillance. Grid 47 had flickered again, twice, briefly. No movement, no incident. Varic's posture shifted as the room began to destabilize in temperament. They weren't angry yet, just uncomfortable. He pressed two fingers to the surface of his disk. A recorded pattern blinked red, then steady white. They used patience as architecture. "You called it dormancy." He paused. "I fought beside them once. Not for them, beside. The war of orbitals, they called it. You called it the Terran containment." His voice hollowed, the words heavier now. I saw them cripple the Varun flotilla, without targeting a single hull. I watched a human technician trigger an AI suicide clause, using only an article in a treaty you co-authored. It wasn't sabotage, it was compliance. He closed his hand around the disk. His fingers trembled faintly, not from age, but from memory. They waged war with understanding, not weapons. Morin Vix rose now, exaggerated in gesture, stylus still twirling. And yet here we are, voting to reclassify Earth's final holdings as abandoned. Their understanding must have taken a long nap. The delegates chuckled. Laughter moved like oil on glass, shiny, surface level, meant more for themselves than for rebuttal. Dravik raised one hand. We appreciate the drama, Sen, but this assembly is not a stage for ancient fears. Earth is no longer a variable. He gestured toward the activation rune, embedded in the center podium. With this we finalize asset quietude. Earth's resources become triumvirate jurisdiction. No motion, no resistance, no defense. The stylus etched the decree. A heads-up display flared. Earth's projection shrinking into a side column. Resource flags blinked into existence, one per orbital grid. Varic closed his eyes. The taste of dry ions lingered on his tongue. Not acrid, not metallic, just empty. A clean void, like water stripped of all mineral, flavorless, but unnatural. He turned to leave. The doors had not opened. Morin Vix called after him, voice slick with finality. Tell your ghosts they lost. Earth had its chance. All it left was silence. Varic paused, just once. He didn't reply. He only stepped forward, boots loud again on the glass-like stone, each footfall a memory resurfaced. As the chamber sealed behind him, the assembly turned inward. Papers rustled. Debates resumed. Banners fluttered in the artificial current. Only Varic knew what they had just done. They hadn't stolen Earth's silence. They had triggered its memory. Declare it. Sign it. Let it vanish from your worries like smoke from your hands. High Strategist Tharn Dravik's voice rang clear beneath the high arch of the council chamber. The ambient air, cooled to match the formal comfort of bureaucratic routine, held the faint sting of filtered minerals, clinical, neutral, over-clean. He stepped down from the dais with the bearing of someone who believed the moment was already history. The stylus in his grip gleamed briefly beneath the tiered plasma lights overhead, its light etched with ownership sequences encoded by decades of policy. Behind him, the heads-up display flickered into alignment. Planetary grid allocations spun into columns, Earth's orbital assets broken down into red-line sectors tagged with acquisition stamps. A pulse of lime blue indicators marked them unmanned, unsecured, uncontested. The display recalibrated twice as raw data from the Jullan relay overlaid new jurisdiction tags. The chamber no longer acknowledged Vorak Sen. He had left in silence, and silence to them was an exit. Commence entry protocols, Dravik ordered, handing the stylus to Rax Durin without ceremony. The sigil scan embedded into its length responded with a soft flicker, marking the authorization permanent. Behind Dravik, aides moved like trained gears, efficient, wordless, systematic. Morin Vix chuckled under his breath, voice lilting with the same laziness that masked his sharper instincts. All this effort for a rock that hasn't broadcast in 36 cycles. You'd think Earth had managed to dig itself into a black hole. Counselor Venn didn't look up. It's policy continuity. A closed loop is cleaner than an open one. A scent of aged polymers and sterilized parchment drifted near the signing consoles, a peculiar mix that recalled more archive than command post. Every corner of the room whispered order, not urgency. Dravik's gaze swept the chamber. Any objections? No voices rose, only the soft clicks of agreement runes being tapped. The central plasma display flashed once. Asset quietude, Phase 1 confirmed. A low chime echoed through the marble-textured walls, a celebratory tone, but subdued, institutional. Send the drone squads to begin tether reclamation. Orbital comms, telemetry relays, cargo belt customs, all of it folds to triumvirate code now. Dravik adjusted the folds of his robe, which dragged faintly across the stepped platform as he returned to his seat. Down in the operations tier, Keller Day hunched over a secondary interface, filtering satellite pings from Earth's upper orbit. One relay, Grid 49, took longer than expected to acknowledge. He flagged it quietly. The others returned standard telemetry. Dormant, minimal, dormant again. He hesitated, finger hovering over a command node. Grid 47's beacon displayed an odd delay signature. Not failure, not resistance, just late, off rhythm. He leaned toward his console, whispering to the aide beside him. Flag this one for manual alignment. Just a clocking issue. Drift variance, barely a percentile. They moved on. The council's rhythm held. Above, Earth continued to rotate in the projected display, its orbit cold, blue, unbothered. Dravik turned toward Vix. You're comfortable overseeing the logistics of this? Vix nodded, hands behind his back. I've deployed mining recon to the upper bands. No movement, dead air. It's a librarian's dream down there. Order without interruption. Then proceed. Cordon off the inbound lanes. If their moon structures still hold, redirect salvage teams. Strip anything that still transmits a code older than 60 cycles. Keller's screen adjusted again. The heads-up display jittered slightly, just a single frame skip, but the recalibration smoothed it before his breath caught. He blinked, rubbed at the corner of his left eye, then resumed filtering return pings. Counselor Brennick cleared his throat without rising. This closes the last open claim from the Cormac concessions. A final signature concludes Earth's relevance. Dravik allowed himself a faint smile, the kind diplomats use when cement dries over old truths. But somewhere deeper, quieter, a thread tugged. Vorok's warning hadn't shouted. It had clung. Outside the chamber, Earth's satellite belt shimmered faintly in the local command feed. The mining drones had begun to align. Ships drifted in disciplined clusters, red-beamed grids marking what needed stripping, what could be left behind. In the quieter wing of the command tier, Keller noticed a delay packet returning from Earth's former defense relay. Just a small hitch in the code, unremarkable. He began decrypting its metadata out of habit, not necessity. The script it returned bore an odd marker, Treaty_37, access tier pre-ratified. He scrolled further. The document held 3 lines of clause identifiers, all time-stamped, all signed under triumvirate code. But one line blinked. Cormac Addendum Clause 17, Reactive Infrastructure Activation, Delay Triggers, Tiered Earth Origin Authorization. Keller frowned. His mouth felt dry. He touched the corner of his tongue to the back of his teeth and tasted salt. He double-checked the source. No intrusion logs, nothing sent, no command breach. Just a passive return from a signature they'd just reactivated themselves. He flagged it again, this time quietly sending a copy to the legal subnet for analysis. Vix, catching the movement from across the chamber, tilted his head. You find something, Day? Keller straightened. Just an outdated treaty marker that didn't convert properly. Cleaning up the tag strings now. Old ghosts, Vix muttered. Let them rattle. Above them, Earth's projection dimmed slightly. Not in function, but tone. The rotation paused, just briefly, before resuming. Dravik tapped the command seal one final time. Initiate full jurisdictional overlay. Transfer complete. The room responded with synchronized nods. Vorok's absence wasn't acknowledged. But in Keller's mind, one image stuck, not from a screen, not from a feed. A flash of Vorok's eye, the live one, cutting through the council like frost through copper, focused, measured, and behind it, the glint of understanding. They hadn't taken Earth. They had pressed against something that hadn't moved because it didn't need to. Grid 47's off-axis again. No visual obstruction, no damage reports. Just drifting wrong. Keller Day's voice carried across the operations tier, clipped but flat. The kind of tone that disguised discomfort beneath calibration. Fingers swept across his console, pulling telemetry into shape. But the data moved like sluggish liquid, frames staggered, jump lines thinned unnaturally at the curves. His nose itched from the dry, stinging air wafting through the overhead ducts. Air meant to preserve machines more than lungs. He leaned in closer, the heads-up display casting fractured blue shadows across his brow. Earth's orbital sequence spun lazily in the corner, its satellite network highlighted in dull red, all tagged as compliant. Yet Grid 47 flickered again. The drift vector showed a lurch to port without impetus. No mass fluctuation, no collision. He pinched the feed's origin trace and sent a scan call to the relay's base, AI. Response lagged. Not denial, just slow. Sleepy. Dravic's voice emerged from the command dais above. Is this your third report on that beacon? Keller nodded without turning. Same discrepancy, different timestamp. Delay response times are doubling on each pass. Dravic moved with quiet weight, his boots tapping against the inlaid ridgeline floor as he descended. His robes stirred the dry air, releasing a subtle blend of ink-dyed fabric and warm synthetics. Systems decay. They're old. Earth hasn't cleaned its orbital layer in decades. Moore and Vix, hunched comfortably along a tiered bench nearby, let out a breathy scoff. Or maybe their ghost fleet finally noticed we're up here and decided to adjust for drama. Mock it if you like, Keller said, but we've got 3 beacons running inconsistent time frames. If it's hardware, fine. If it's not. Vix tapped his temple once, grinning. Don't tell me you're buying Vorac's mystic whisper routine. Silent wars and treaties with teeth. Treaties don't rewrite telemetry, Keller muttered, dragging another overlay into view. But this might. He zoomed in on the waveform signature coming from the relay. The line jittered, not wildly, not dramatically, just enough to read wrong to trained eyes. A tiny tooth in the waveform, repeating every 3.6 seconds, too subtle to trigger alarms, too regular to be random. Dravic stepped behind Keller's shoulder. What do you think it is? I think something's whispering inside the code. For a moment no one spoke, just the whisper click of fingers against control pads, the quiet churn of logic processing behind reinforced walls. Dravic's expression didn't shift, but something in the angle of his posture changed. Flag it for analysis. Tier 2 encryption. Don't broadcast outside station systems. Keller nodded, saving the flag. The tag shimmered briefly on the upper tier's master relay before vanishing into archive layers. Vix, feigning disinterest, watched from the edge of his peripheral vision. Outside, the orbital feed rotated. Earth hung inert in the center, its surface veiled in a blanket of calm clouds. No transmissions, no energy spikes, just stillness, irritating, unshakable stillness. Keller wiped his thumb across his lower lip, skin dry enough to rasp against itself. He turned back to the console and cued a system ping to grid 50. It returned immediately. So did 48. 47 responded last. It chirped once, then delivered a static-wrapped reply. The screen momentarily flashed, a shimmer of snow, brief but unmistakable. Dravic frowned. Static, from a node without broadcast capability. I thought Earth's relays were inert. They were, Keller said, until we reauthorized them. That stuck. Vix looked up. So we gave them back the key. His voice cracked slightly on the end, whether from disbelief or something deeper. Keller didn't care to guess. No, we gave them a door. Keller's gaze narrowed. The key might have always been theirs. Dravic turned toward the upper display. The system map widened. 3 relays now showed minor inconsistencies, none large enough to warrant escalation, all just inconvenient, all just wrong. He stepped away without further comment. Keller sat back, knuckles taut around the edge of the display. The buzz beneath his chair wasn't audible, but he could feel it, a subtle vibration that seemed to live just below awareness, like a second heartbeat in the floor. He closed his eyes. The memory returned without permission. Flashback. The war. The orbit above Nemrose 3. Vorac had been there too. They watched from a Corvette-class observation window. A Terran destroyer had dropped out of stealth just behind the Saracen line. No weapons deployed, no fleet markers. One signal was sent. Just a sequence, 4 tones, silent to most instruments. The destroyer flickered, not cloaked, not jammed, folded, into space. No, through it, and then it was gone. No wake, no trail. The Saracen ships began misfiring weapons within 3 minutes. Their primary command AI began issuing contradictory commands. 10 minutes later, their own cruisers began attacking each other, every sensor feed reading their allies as hostiles. By the end of the hour, there was no one left to fight. Vorac had said nothing at the time, just stared through the window. They don't strike, Vorac whispered that day. They convince you to strike yourself. Keller opened his eyes. Sir, one of the junior operators called from across the pit. We've got another delayed ping. Grid 51 this time. Drift trajectories widening. Correct it, Dravik replied without looking. Tether them back into sync. It's not resisting, the operator said, eyes narrowing. It's complying, but off time. Keller's stomach sank. Not resistance, a rehearsal. He stood. We need to isolate this quadrant. Now, full firewall across telemetry nodes. No outbound commands. Dravik turned. That's excessive. Keller didn't flinch. So was the silence before the Saracen vanished. Vix barked out a disbelieving laugh. You're comparing orbit maintenance to war crimes. No. Keller's voice lowered. I'm comparing déjà vu. The lights above dimmed briefly. A soft chirp emerged from the central pillar, then stopped, mid-cycle. Outside, Grid 47 re-centered itself. Its beacon pulse adjusted. Drift pattern flattened. Keller stared. See, Vix said, even ghosts have to correct course. But Keller didn't answer. The pulse had stabilized, but not to station standard. It had synchronized to Earth's rotational lag, and Earth hadn't moved. Not once, not ever, but now everything else was. Adjust that trajectory. It's bending where it shouldn't even flex. Kellerday's voice sliced through the command tier, sharp with calculation, not panic. His hands danced across the console, recalibrating star lanes while sweat clung just beneath his collar. The laser plasma display before him pulsed with corridor overlays, but the corridors wouldn't hold still. Jump vectors spasmed, small, exact deviations, like they were obeying another set of instructions, layered just beneath visible data. The room responded too slowly. On the upper dais, High Strategist Tharn Dravik stood with one palm resting on the control rail, spine rigid as a containment bar. His silence wasn't patience. It was surveillance. Watching the system, watching the operators, waiting to see which would fail first. From the corner of the chamber, Morin Vix leaned on a side pillar, chewing something bitter from a silver pouch, posture loose, but his eyes didn't match. They followed the shifting maps like a predator gauging wind. Cargo train Dastral Blues reporting navigation delay, one of the junior analysts announced. Micro jump off course, 6 degrees east of the arc, no external interference. No gravitational pockets, not even dust. Keller snapped, shut down its automated drift correction. I want manual pullback, no guesswork. The technician nodded, hands moving faster now, brow slick with recycled air condensation. From above, Dravik spoke. Could the gravity well at Theta 9 be interfering? Impossible. The arc deviation began before their proximity burn. Then the ship's alignment is faulty. It's not the ship, Keller said without hesitation. It's the map. The words lingered longer than they should have. Dravik stepped forward. Explain. The drift isn't random, Keller replied. It's deliberate, microscopic, but cumulative. Each jump reorients itself around a center that's no longer the one we calculated. He pointed to the center band of the heads-up display. The highlighted trajectory line shimmered, barely, but now curved inward. Earth's location sat just outside that arc. It's like the maps being rewritten from beneath, Keller added. Not jammed, not scrambled, reauthored. By whom? Dravik's tone dipped into ice. I don't know, Keller said, then hesitated. Or I do. He ran a command trace, feeding in sequence overlays from the last 3 intersector jumps. The results aligned, not within acceptable margins, within perfect rhythm. Each new jump curved toward a non-commanded apex. Earth. Dravik exhaled, slowly. We would have seen the software alteration. Keller turned fully toward him now. Only if we were looking in the right place. If the alterations baked into the navigation constants, through treaty updates, infrastructure grants, support firmware, we wouldn't see it, we'd follow it. Morin Vix barked a dry laugh. So Earth drew us a star map, and waited for us to use it. They didn't draw it, Keller replied, voice lower now. They wrote into the paper it was printed on. Across the tier, the laser plasma map shifted again. Another jump vessel, Telvax Green, disappeared from visual. No explosion, no distress flare, just off course and gone. The screen flagged its final marker, route confirmed, path opened, ship in transit. Except the endpoint was blank. They're not lost, Keller whispered. They're being pulled somewhere we can't track. Destination? Dravik demanded. Undefined. The path points toward Earth, but the ship's not heading there directly. It's orbiting something we can't see. Vix shook his head. jaw tight. Wormhole theory? Artificial gravity pockets? No, Keller said. It's not a distortion, it's a frame. Someone changed the reference architecture of the grid. The strategist looked like he was staring through his own thoughts now. A flash of red pulsed across the center of the display. Convoy Valaris Gray, non-return. Then another. Relay ping, inconclusive. Contact status unknown. A silence pressed into the room, not quiet, but compression. Like every sound moved slower through thickening air. Keller reached back to the console and opened an encrypted archive. His fingers hovered, then selected a flagged transmission from 18 years ago. Triumvirate origin, Earth-directed, unreadable. The title, Concord Treaty Clause Appendix, Post-Cormac Addenda. He input the override. The document unrolled like coiled silk. But it wasn't a message, it was a key, a layout, coordinate patterns hidden behind text arrays, not encryption, encoding, spaced as legal language, buried in contract formats. Every shipping lane reauthored by clause headers no one had reason to inspect. One stood out, Clause 27, Gravitational Architecture Maintenance, Earth Origin Templates, accepted. The second half wasn't translated by Triumvirate Systems. Varic had once translated something similar, years ago, after the Nemrose 3 incident, not in a war room, in silence, just 2 chairs and a single datapad. He remembered the words Varic had said aloud. Once, they didn't make the grid, Varic had muttered, staring at the pattern. They redefined what center meant. Keller whispered that now, in a voice that barely reached his own ears. Behind him, Dravic turned sharply. What did you say? They moved the center, Keller repeated. Of our system, of our assumptions. We never checked the origin point of our own charts. After we installed Earth's upgrades, we just rerouted through them. The strategist crossed to the map. And the disappearances, they're not being destroyed, Keller said. They're being navigated, just not by us. He turned to face Dravic, expression hollowing under the weight of realization. Our jump gates don't obey us. They never did. They just waited for this clause to align. And now they're folding. Into what? Keller didn't answer immediately. Then softly, into somewhere only Earth knows exists. The lights overhead dipped briefly. As the system recalibrated grid overlays, the stars realigned fractionally on the display, barely visible, but enough to unsettle every officer watching. No alarms, no warnings, just course corrections they hadn't commanded. The star map blinked once more. Cargo ship Dastral Blue, outside scope. That was the 4th. No distress signals, no records of impact, just clean, silent absence. Dravic didn't speak, he just stared. Morin Vix, usually the first to joke, now chewed hard on the inside of his cheek. They're folding us, Keller whispered again, one ship at a time. The strategist looked at the display like it had betrayed him. His voice dropped into a dead-cold register. Pull every outbound convoy. Seal the jump gates. Lock Earth's network from future access. Keller didn't move. We can't. Why not? Because we're using their keys. They locked us in the moment we pressed accept. And the map, folding softly into a shape they no longer understood, continued redrawing itself, line by line, star by star, around a single silent center, Earth. That's not our ship. The words dropped from Keller Day's lips as the heads-up display flared with a new contact, unmarked, unregistered, identical to triumvirate design. The unknown vessel drifted at the edge of Relay Cluster Theta, just outside the regulated beacon boundary. It didn't ping back. No call sign, no thermal trail. It existed only through reflection, someone else's eyes reporting it. Within seconds 5 more appeared, not approaching, not brochexing, just present, like memories rendered physical. Keller's throat tightened. Contact signatures wrong, no drive pulse, no heat bleed, but it's mimicking our configuration down to the hull scars. Projection anomaly? Suggested one technician without conviction. No, Keller said. They're not projections. They're instructions being read wrong. Morin Vix stood now, arms crossed, face still wearing its usual smirk, but his weight shifted uneasily between his feet. We've seen spoof echoes before. False positives, ghost returns. This is old noise. This isn't noise, Keller answered. It's mimicry, and our systems are falling for it. The Velthar Lance, flagship of the Cordanus Outer Defense Ring, had already rerouted its gunships toward the Theta flank. Its captain's signature blinked green across the command rail. Request for engagement authorization pending. Hold that command, Keller called out. Too late. The fire arcs painted themselves in red lines across the display. Velthar Lance opened up. Volley after volley surged through empty vacuum, targeting contacts that returned no resistance, no deviation, no loss. Keller pivoted to the strategic board. Are we tracking confirmed hits? No physical impact, came the answer. Energy disperses on contact, but nothing responds. Then a blip. Friendly impact detected. The Cairn's Wish, Velthar Lance's close-range support frigate, jolted sideways on the display. Its hull tore along the ventral shielding. One of Lance's blasts had clipped its stabilization array. Not an error. A misfire triggered by guidance misalignment. Shut down auto-tracking, Keller shouted. Dravic's voice came in close. Why are we hitting our own units? They're targeting false threats with real weapons. These echoes are seeded in our logic trees. What kind of weapon creates its enemies from your own data? Keller's voice dropped. A human one. Vic stared at the map. You're saying we're not just blind, we're misseeing. We're not seeing at all, we're being shown. The Cairn's Wish spun out of formation, trailing coolant and structural debris. No external vessel struck it. No outside weapon interfered. Only a friend who no longer recognized friend. Keller remembered the Saracen Dominion. He remembered Varic standing beside him at the observation point, neither speaking as a full war group collapsed in under half an hour. At first, Saracen ships fired on phantoms, then on allies. Their logic matrices had been flooded with artificial enemies that mimicked proximity, shape, energy signature. One misplaced validation loop, one false flag, turned their unity into chaos. No code had been transmitted, only visual triggers, ship silhouettes, expected return delays, sensor trust mechanisms, and the humans had only needed to introduce the suggestion. Varic said then, softly, they turn your eyes against you. The last command is always yours. More contacts bloomed on the display. Each new one mirrored an existing ship, not perfectly, but close enough that targeting systems flagged them as threats before a human brain ever second-guessed. Velthar Lance rotated midline, adjusted cannon vectors. It was hunting its own shadows now. Override its fire path. Dravic snapped. Keller's hands moved to comply. Too late. Override systems are recognizing ghosts as command beacons. They're treating illusions as authentication. On the outer perimeter, another escort went dark. No breach, no flash, just a silent blink out of registry. Its last transmission read correction loop failure. Multiple confirmed hostiles. Except there were none. Just echoes, false ships that didn't exist, except in the minds of their observers. Data channels began to stall, looped responses cycling without resolution. False queries were being responded to by false contacts. Network contagion. Like a hallucination you couldn't blink away. Purge the system, Dravic ordered. Can't, Keller said, teeth clenched. It's rebuilding logic faster than we can strip it. The core is taking orders from the contamination. The Lance fired again, this time into the dark, toward a flicker that didn't repeat. A nearby mining platform, misflagged, exploded under the barrage. Dravic's face turned stone. This isn't battle, he said. This is collapse. Across the upper band, smaller defense ships began moving without orders. They were triangulating on each other now, each reading a friend as enemy. Echoes mapped them all. On the feed, ship silhouettes blurred as their identifying overlays flickered. Name, class, origin, rotating through false values. The ghosts are overriding identification frames, Keller said. You don't see your ally's name, you see the closest threat profile that fits the shape. Vix had stopped chewing. He moved toward Keller slowly. What do we do? Keller stared at the screen. No enemies had arrived. No human ships. No Terran fleet. No direct attack. Just silence and suggestion. I don't know, he said, but the more we respond, the more we destroy ourselves. A war without war. A battlefield drawn only in memory, unfolding again inside the minds of those who once laughed at it. Across the final rows of the display, new echoes arrived, but this time, they were mapped from the Triumvirate's own archives. Ships long decommissioned, lost or destroyed in training exercises. Not even ghosts, fictions made familiar. The system had been taught to recognize fear, and it was acting accordingly. Jump the fleet, now. General Nasktrell's voice struck like a whip across the Velthar Vex's bridge. Emergency lighting bathed the tiered command pits in restless amber pulses, each flicker revealing more chaos, officers arguing over targeting parameters, sensor techs wrestling with ghost pings, backup protocols triggering and canceling themselves in stuttering loops. No enemies in sight, just echoes, blurred contacts mimicking ship IDs, accelerating collapse without ever firing a weapon. Trell didn't wait for agreement. He punched in the jump coordinates manually, ignoring the auto-suggestions that had begun cycling in self-referencing spirals. The heads-up navigation field stretched into a raw blur of mismatched arcs and grid overlays. Lock any vector, he growled. Pick one. Exit this sector. Varic, his navigation officer, hesitated. Coordinates won't stabilize. We're drifting outside charted gravity. I didn't ask for safe, Trell snapped. Get us away. The chamber thrummed under the jump cores powering up. A cold, static taste laced the recycled air. Every breath felt a degree too dry, as if the ship itself no longer trusted its own life support to stay balanced. Trell stared at the forward screen. Stars warped across the curved display, then froze mid-stretch. The Vex engaged its jump. For a heartbeat, space folded. Then it ruptured. A flicker, no fireball, no scream, no trailing wreckage. The ship vanished. A moment later, its telemetry ceased. No ping, no echo, just silence. A vector swallowed whole by something no instrument could track. On Coordinate Station, the transmission log spat out a final unreadable burst. The system flagged it as corrupted. Keller Day flagged it as evidence. He rose from his post, walked straight to the council chamber, without waiting for authorization. Behind him, data towers blinked erratically, their colored stripes flickering between command states. Sections of the main board turned gray, non-responsive, as if fatigued from misdirection. Emergency quorum now, he said as the chamber doors hissed open. High Strategist Varic, already in place, looked up. Report, Vex initiated blind jump. No return, no debris. Navigation fed it a self-collapsing route. Error in entry sequence. No. Keller stepped to the central display. Earth didn't need to rewrite our maps. They only had to change where exit leads. He tapped the interface. The station's full star path flared to life. Waypoints twisted subtly inward. On closer inspection, the exits coiled like closed fingers. We're not connected to the sectors we think we are, Keller continued. The star lanes are reoriented. Jump paths we charted decades ago have been altered from the inside, seamlessly, legally. Counselor Brennick stood, his voice trembling under practiced authority. That's impossible. No external access would permit. They didn't use external access. Keller activated an archival display. Lines of treaty language emerged. Each line appeared standard, reconstruction infrastructure clauses, power routing guarantees, automated firmware update protocols for trade ship compatibility. But embedded beneath the header formatting lay the real payload. Sub-command logic paths, network override privileges, jump gate reinitialization rights, buried inside formatting metadata. This is a ratified clause from 74 years ago, Keller said, hidden in a routine support package. You all signed it. No one reads firmware sublayers in treaty contracts. Someone muttered from the lower seats. Earth did, Keller replied. Varic took a slow step forward. You're saying we gave them control? No. Keller's voice turned bitter. We gave them consent. Across the chamber, the laser plasma walls shifted, projecting jump gate telemetry live. More ships disappeared from the feed. No alerts, just vanishing contacts, one by one like someone erasing names from a list. This is a software kill, Keller said. Not a virus, not sabotage, just execution of already approved permissions. Every vessel we sent with updated navigation relied on Earth origin charting overlays, every one of them. Vix paced near the outer columns. If they've collapsed the paths, what about retreat vectors? Also Earth mapped, Keller said. If we try to jump, we fall into loops, or worse. Brennick slammed his hand on the desk. Disable their updates, reassert manual control. They anticipated that, Keller replied. Their updates reroute fallback sequences through dummy confirmation beacons. Even trying to override triggers validation routines we can't break. We've tried. The system defends itself. Behind him, another tower dimmed. Its projection rolled into static, then black. Why didn't we see this coming? A younger aide whispered from the gallery above. Keller didn't look at him. Because they didn't fight us. They just waited for us to obey. Across the central platform, Varic stared at the pulsing remnants of the sector's structure, fractured relay points, broken confirmation chains, cargo ships vanishing into nothing. Keller tapped a secondary sequence into the display. An archived visual populated. Varic Sen, 2 decades younger, sitting in a debrief room surrounded by data pads. A Terran commander sat across from him, arms folded, quiet. The audio kicked in mid-conversation. Didn't need weapons, the human was saying. We left our presence inside your systems. Not code, not traps. Invitations. Varic's voice came, raspy, cautious. And if we decline to act, you won't, the human replied. You're a governing body. Sooner or later, you'll enforce a clause you've forgotten. And when you do, we're already there. The feed ended. Silence fell again across the chamber. Outside, another signal dropped. Velthar Vex's last support ship issued a ping, caught a folded vector, and vanished. The counselors sat still, their robes whispering against the leather of their seats, as if even their fabric had grown uncertain. This was never war, Keller said. This was architecture. We built it. Earth signed the blueprint. Then waited. Varic didn't move. His hand slid slowly across the control dais and closed into a fist. Summon every technarch we have left, he said. Find the breach point. There isn't one, Keller answered. There's only origin. Outside the walls, the relay grid flickered once more, then reset. No enemies waited at the gates, because the gates belonged to Earth now, and they had never knocked. They'd simply written the lock, and let time turn the handle. Initiate override sequence 12. Disable all outbound. Dravic's voice ended mid-command. Not cut off, not interrupted. It simply stopped existing. The chamber paused, stunned. His lips still moved, slow, deliberate syllables spoken with intent, but no sound followed. No echo reached the council floor. No transmission blinked acknowledgement. Keller turned sharply. Say that again. Varic tried. His throat moved. Tongue-shaped consonants. Nothing emerged. A ripple passed through the chamber. Not heard, but felt. Robes shifted. Heads turned. Counselors leaned toward one another, speaking names, issuing orders, pleading for confirmation. Nothing. Mouths moved. Silence endured. Technarch Duvax Rin sprinted in from the adjoining wing, clutching a data slate against his chest, as if shielding it from gravity. His breathing rasped, shallow from effort, and dry atmosphere, though no one could hear it. He skidded to a halt, eyes wild, and lifted the slate. On its screen pulsed one phrase, quantum voice erasure nodes activated. Dravic's eyes narrowed. He stabbed a finger at the message, lips forming a silent question. Rin nodded once, sharp, sweat flicking from his chin. Counselor Brennick slammed his palm against his comm plate. A red glyph blinked in rejection. He struck it again, harder. Still nothing. Screens along the upper edge of the chamber flickered between failure codes and partial updates. No audio, no transmission waveforms. Even sublingual backups returned void. Keller crossed the chamber, motioning furiously to Rin. The Technarch thrust the slate into his hands. A secondary file opened beneath the first alert. Treaty Addendum 27, Earth Council Codex. Article 27, Non-Aggressive Retention Protocols. Clause 4, Communication Nullification through Agreed Infrastructure. Triggers QVNs. Timestamp, Triumvirate Majority. Ratified 73 cycles prior. Keller's stomach coiled. Varic loomed over his shoulder, reading. His expression cracked, not with panic, but understanding. They hadn't been silenced by weapons. They had silenced themselves, long ago, when they agreed to a treaty clause buried in page 612 of a reconstruction framework, labeled Civilian Tech Standardization. Every system on Coordinate Station, the floors beneath them, the walls around them, the lights above, had run on Earth's quiet logic for decades, and now that logic had rewritten the rules of command. One by one, counselors slumped into their seats. Some stood, waving their hands, pantomiming urgency. Others froze entirely, mouths pressed into narrow lines, words never formed, no alarms, no explosions, just absence. A dry electric sting rolled down Keller's spine as he moved to the nearest control panel and typed, "Manual communication override. Internal circuit A, nothing. Fallback path, subvocal relay nothing." He looked up, saw Rin raising one finger. Keller met his gaze. Rin tapped the screen again. Another line appeared. Clause activation origin, Earth Grid 47, treaty fulfillment state. Keller exhaled through his nose, jaw locked. Grid 47. The one that had drifted, the one he'd flagged, the one they'd accepted back into service without a second review. A glitch, they thought. No, a signal. Memory rose without permission. Varic, scarred, quiet, watching a Sadar forward base crumble from within. He had spoken of silence once, not as surrender, but as leverage. They used no weapons, Varic had said, just silence. A base full of warriors, medics, commanders. Once the voice links went dead, they began surrendering in shifts, not because they were beaten, because they were alone with their thoughts. Keller stepped forward, raising his hands, motioning for calm. Half the council didn't see him. The other half wouldn't meet his eyes. Varic approached the central dais and activated the main relay key, normally used for formal declarations. He opened his mouth. Silence followed. The station lights dimmed a fraction. A low hum passed beneath their feet, not of machinery, but of power realigning itself. The air tasted of stale cloth and ionized circuits. A crack spidered across the room's central crystal, the ancient core of the council's communications grid. One long fracture split its surface from crown to base, catching the ambient light and scattering it like fractured glass. Dust trickled from the break. The visual feeds began to roll through internal loops, council members gesturing, panic on repeat. No external signals returned, no outside requests, no ships calling for clarity, no patrols checking in, just coordinates, adrift in function, drowning in silence. Vic stood alone now, his usual arrogance erased. He mouthed something toward Keller, but the distance was too great to read his lips. Keller held up the slate. He tilted it to show the clause again, the activation line, the signature block that carried all their names. Every signature was still valid. Across the chamber, the light continued to fade in gradients, warm gold retreating into cooler blues, then deeper shadows. A few aides began writing frantically on scraps of plastic sheeting, passing messages by hand like primitives. But even the language felt dull now, stripped of urgency. Earth hadn't spoken. It didn't need to. Coordinates had already answered its question, a question disguised as protocol. Now stripped of voice, the tribunal moved in slow pantomime, governance reduced to gesture, power undone by consent. Rin dropped to a seat near the wall, face blank, as if the slate had become heavier than his arms could bear. Varic returned to the dais, stood behind the broken crystal, hands braced against the railing. He opened his mouth again. This time, no one looked. Above them, the heads-up display flickered one last time. A silent transmission from Grid 47. One glyph, one message, not text, just a single unblinking icon. Treaty upheld. The lights dimmed again. The air grew still. The council, once a cathedral of voices, now echoed only in memory. And Earth said nothing, because silence had been the answer all along. They thought silence was surrender. Varic Sen whispered the words into the dead air of his chamber, his voice rasping against the edges of recycled oxygen. The ceiling lights flickered once, then dimmed into their last setting, emergency dusk. Outside his narrow viewport, Cordanus spun crookedly, its structural axis wobbling from destabilized station thrusters. The orbital tethers were slack now, dragging broken banners through the orbital dusk like wilted vines. No systems buzzed, no orders arrived, no final protests emerged. He stood alone. Below him, the council chamber had become a mausoleum. Delegates sat like waxen echoes, mouths locked mid-command, fingers curled over silenced consoles, shadows stretching longer than authority ever did. The cracked crystal at the center of the hall no longer glowed. It wept dust. Varic's boots scraped across the uneven floor as he moved to the table. He picked up the old service disc, its surface worn smooth, the insignia long faded beneath thumb and ash. He rotated it once, not out of ritual, but remembrance, in his final hours aboard Cordanus. He needed no audience. He walked the halls slowly, not out of frailty, but out of respect for the place, for the silence, for what had finally spoken louder than fear ever could. The doors to the primary launch corridor remained unlocked, their mechanisms too old to resist power dropouts. He passed through. The docking bay was a cathedral of emptiness. Half the ships were missing, some fled, some lost, some deleted. The ones that remained floated inert, hulls wrapped in frost, no crew in sight. Varic stepped into his old courier vessel. The interior held the same chill as the chamber he left. A scent of rusted polymer and dry cabling lingered. His coat, once ceremonial, now served only to keep warmth pressed near his ribs. The chair greeted him like a long-buried friend, uncomfortable, unforgiving, familiar. He tapped the heads-up console. It flickered back reluctantly. Primary drive functional vertical bar, fuel cells nominal vertical bar, long-range comms, unavailable. He keyed in one last beacon code, an autonomous loop designed to repeat across neutral bands indefinitely. No encryption, no demands, just a message few would translate. He recorded it anyway. Cordanus fell without siege. It fell because it forgot. Earth did not roar. It remembered, and we ignored what memory can become. His hand hovered over the dispatch sequence, then pressed. The signal launched in silence. He rose again, stepping back into the corridor of his ship. One hand reached into his pocket, pulling the service medal free. He held it up to the glow of the emergency lighting. No shine returned. He crouched, placed it near the forward bulkhead, then gave it a push. The disc slid across the floor with a soft rasp, came to rest against the bulk wall, and didn't move again. No one would pick it up. He sealed the hatch behind him. The vessel shuddered to life. No noise, just tremors beneath his soles. The docking clamps disengaged. His display mapped a course not away from Earth, but away from the wreckage it had left untouched. He glided through the field of broken ships, names scraped off, flags unmoored. Some hulls bore laser scoring, not from Earth, but from each other. The last acts of confusion, the final proof that silence required no ammunition. Cordanus shrank in his viewport. Its once golden ring of relay lights had gone dark. A command station that once governed 6 sectors now spun like a dead leaf in orbit. Varic turned off the external feed. He didn't need to see the ruin. He had already memorized its shape. His eyes closed. The cold of space pressed against the edges of his vessel's frame. Systems cycled. Guidance held. He drifted beyond the outer lane markers, where no signal was meant to track. The old memory came back, crisp, uninvited, exact. A campfire on an empty field, surrounded by silence. Blackout protocol had silenced comms, sensors, even wrist indicators. The only sound had been the fire crackling in open defiance of all logic. A Terran soldier sat beside him, young, hands covered in field resin. He didn't speak for hours. When he finally did, his voice was low, like stone over water. "We only raise our voice if we have to." Varic remembered the way he said have to, not as threat, not as boast, as burden. He opened his eyes. Earth had never needed to raise it. The galaxy had spoken first. All Earth had done was answer, with silence strong enough to shatter structure, erase command, and displace history. Cordanus had tried to overwrite Earth's relevance. Now its own archives no longer remembered their names. A few counselors might have survived. Some ships would return home, if they found any home left to return to. But they would bring no story of conquest, only whispers and warnings. He adjusted course again, plotting a longer drift path, one that would never approach central colonies again. He didn't belong there anymore. He belonged where memories lingered, and this memory would linger. No one would write songs about it. No empires would issue medals, no peace accords would follow. But every station engineer, who reviewed their map structures from this day forward, would pause when they saw a Terran clause, buried in the code. Every fleet commander would think twice before overriding an Earth origin beacon, and every diplomat would be taught, not just language, not just gesture, but silence. Varic let the systems idle. The stars crawled forward, one flicker at a time. Cordanus drifted behind him, its lights gone, its voice gone, its legacy reduced to static. But memory endured, and it bore a human shape now, ruthless only through patience, unyielding only through law. Earth had raised nothing, it had waited, and Varic alone would carry that lesson into the dark. He leaned back, let the weight press evenly against his shoulders, and whispered to no one. They laughed. I warned them. The words faded into the cabin air, and Earth, as always, replied with nothing, because silence was all it ever needed.